Okay, hello everyone. I think we're live right now. Can everyone hear us well enough? Just post in the comments if you can hear us well. Not seeing any new comments popping up yet. Okay, Koen is replying yes, Nuno is replying yes. Okay, perfectly. Hi, everyone. Welcome to a new Laravel Internals podcast. We've decided a couple of weeks ago with the Laravel team that we're going to do this podcast, the stream rather, a couple of times. We don't have a fixed schedule or anything. We're just like living in the moment when we decide to do an episode. And we decided to rotate the people at Laravel, the employees, a little bit. So last time you had James and Nuno talking about Vapor, Forge, and all that. And this time you'll have me and Mohammed talking about various things, also Vapor stuff, but also the new PHP 8 release, and a little bit about the work behind the scenes we did to get everything ready in time for you to start upgrading at the launch day of PHP. So before I'm going to start, I'm going to mention that it's okay to ask questions in the chat. We probably won't have time to answer all of your questions, but when you have a question, feel free to post it in chat. And if I see an interesting one, I'll try to mark it and we'll try to answer that. But first, let's get started. Hi, Mohammed, how are you?
Hi, Jade, how are you?
I'm doing just great. Yeah, have a good day already?
Yes, I heard it's cold in Belgium and it's cold in Egypt, but it's the word cold doesn't mean the same between Belgium and Egypt. So yours must be too cold, and my winter here must be summer to you. So it's quite funny, the difference.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit difference in degrees there. I think it's like 6 degrees out here at the moment in Belgium. I would love to spend the winter period in Egypt if I could, but now it's rather a bad time to do that, I think. It's good to hear that everything's going good for you. What have you been up to so far today? Or is there any secret stuff that we can't reveal yet?
Yeah, I've been working for the past couple of weeks on features for the queue system. I think they are really interesting features and good additions to the system. And I'm going to speak about it in detail later today during the podcast. But other than this, I spent my morning taking care of my son. He's quite a very, very loud dude. So that's what I've been up to today, just spending the time with my son and working on the queue system features. How about you?
Yeah, I've been doing the daily stuff I've been doing, like reviewing issues that are coming in, trying to help people out a little bit, also on Discord, trying to fix some bugs and just replying to people who are asking for help. And I'm almost done with that for this part of the day. So after that, I'm going to some tasks that Taylor assigned to me. But let's get started with the real content of this podcast. So as most of you know, PHP 8 is out yet. And in the past 2 months or so, we've been, or actually the past 4 months or 5 months already, we've been very hard at work at providing support for PHP 8 in the framework and its first-party packages. We started out with the framework itself, of course. So I think we landed PHP 8 support in the framework fully in October or something, but we've been working hard at it since May or even June and July already. And Graham Campbell has been a very big help with that. He's been patching up a lot of third-party packages to help us with that. And also, there was a lot of different kind of third-party packages that needed to be patched. So as you know, Laravel depends on a lot of open source packages like the AWS SDK, Fly System, Faker, Test Bench, PHP Unit, Guzzle, you name it. There's a long list of packages that we depend on. Very grateful and thankful to the open source maintainers for maintaining those for us. And we've been trying to send in pull requests here and there to help them out a little bit. Thankfully, we got everything ready in time, so that's very nice, of course. But yeah, like I think like everything around that, around the framework part has been going pretty smooth. We got everything in time for launch. I don't know, Mohammed, have you already been testing Laravel 8, PHP 8 with Laravel already?
Yeah, while testing, no, not on a production application, but while supporting PHP 8 for Vapor and Forge, I tested I deployed the test application and made sure that everything works, sending emails, notifications, the queue system, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I did test PHP 8, especially when running on Vapor. Yeah, you can say I tested it in using a production application, because I actually deployed Forge on Vapor to test PHP 8. So that can be considered production app.
Okay, that's great to hear. Yeah, it's really great. Like I think PHP 8 is already available in Vapor, like you said. I think James, like yesterday or the day before, released PHP 8 support on Forge. So all of those services are already patched, ready for you to get started with the latest version of PHP. So it's really nice that we're doing that so fast. I have to say, like, the entire transition to PHP 8 has been really smooth. Like the PHP internals team, the core developers have been doing a very, very good job at making the transition as smooth as possible. Of course, there were some quirks here and there, like some callable features have been changing, some internal stuff, but overall we really worked around those parts very well. We also decided to provide support for PHP 8 in the Laravel 6 LTS edition, just so like because as you may know, the Laravel 6 version has been closed off for new features. We're just only providing bug fixes for that right now, but we did want to make sure that everyone who's on LTS can upgrade to the latest and safest version of PHP, not to be a blocker there.
Well, I think that's a funny thing, because like if you want to upgrade to PHP 8 while staying on Laravel 6, why not just upgrade to Laravel 8 and use PHP 8? Like if you are someone who likes to upgrade and use the latest version, I think you would before you upgrade to PHP 8, you would upgrade to Laravel 8 as well and not stay on Laravel 6. So that's why I think it's funny.
Yeah, and I kind of agree with you that, like, because as most people know, like Laravel upgrades, they usually aren't that hard. They usually take like an hour or so, or depending on how complicated your app is, they might take longer. But like you said, like upgrades are in general very smooth between major versions. Tools like Laravel Shift help a lot with doing those upgrades. So yeah, why didn't we just make PHP 8 support only available in Laravel 8? And I think it's because like LTS in general means a lot for like really enterprise apps, for people using those. And I think like it still like makes sense to like do the additional small effort on our part to provide support for it in the LTS version. So people who are on those versions for a longer period can still enjoy the latest PHP version, the latest upgrades. And because of that reasoning, we also decided to patch up Laravel 7, because as you know, Laravel 7 is kind of end of life at the moment, only security fixes at the moment, I believe. And we just decided to just roll out all of the updates for 6, 7, and 8, because it's a really small effort on our part, and we wouldn't be blocking people as much as before. It's not the same for, I think, in regard as like introducing new features for those oldest versions, because that still is something I feel like which should only be available in the last feature, in the last version of Laravel, because it doesn't make sense to keep on adding new features to older versions, which we're not going to maintain anymore soon. But PHP 8 support was such a large major milestone in PHP in general. So that's why I think it made sense to provide support on those older versions.
how long did it take you to provide support for PHP to all the Laravel ecosystem, like all the packages and the framework and such? How long, roughly, how long did it take?
Well, I think like I said, we've been starting working on PHP 8 support back in May or June something. I think Graham was the first one who started to send in pull requests to third-party libraries. The framework definitely took the longest time because we only finished in, I think, like October, and that was mostly part due to the third-party blocking blockers, because as you know, like not every open source maintainer has time to immediately provide support for a new version. It also depends, of course, on new release candidates of PHP 8 coming out, maybe introducing more breaking changes. So it makes sense to like wait a little bit before landing in full support. But in October somewhere or beginning of November, I'm not sure what the exact date was, we managed to wrap that up and make sure that the framework is at least ready for all of those other packages, depending on Laravel, to start upgrading. So I think definitely a couple of months there for in total. For the first party libraries, it went a little bit smoother. I think most of the first party libraries that I took care of were already patched like halfway through November. There were some blockers like Dusk, who was waiting on PHP WebDriver to be patched. And I got a lot of great help from the maintainers there, from William and Andre. We mostly battled a little bit with Travis because they had quite a complex setup on Travis, and Travis in the latest days is kind of slow compared to something like Circle.ci and GitHub Actions. I can really recommend everyone to upgrade to GitHub Actions because it's such a much smoother experience, in my opinion. But we got that wrapped up thanks to their help. We got Passport, which was kind of a blocker as well, but I got a lot of help from Andy, who maintains OAuth2 server, and Louis, who maintains the JWT library. They were a very big help in getting that all done in time. Especially Louis, he did a really big job, a really big effort to get everything patched, wrote a lot of code to make that happen. Then Nextmo notification channel, I actually released the PHP 8 support for that today. So Chris Tankerley has been maintaining that one on part of Nexmo's. And he today he released, or like yesterday, he released PHP 8 support for their package. So that's out of the window right now. The only first-party package that's currently pending is Scout. And we're still waiting on Algolia PHP SDK to provide support there. It's currently a little bit blocked because they still support quite a few older PHP versions. But I did some digging into how we can support those as well. And I found a really nice polyfill package for PHP units, which should be able to run on older PHP versions as well. Because they still have a lot of customers on older PHP versions. So I'm hopeful that we'll get to resolve that soon as well. I think that's a little bit...
Yeah, but overall, like, you think that the PHP community or PHP developers all over the world, they are working all the time to make sure that their packages and their libraries are up to date with the latest version of PHP. And that says something. That is like that PHP is it's very active right now when compared to like 10 years ago or so, where everything was very slow, but now everything is moving really fast and you have to keep up. So I think you agree with me on that.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you on that. It's very true. Also, I think like tools like Twitter or GitHub in general really help out in connecting the dots between all of these packages, between people in general. Like, it's so easy to reach out to people these days through those channels and offer support, helping each other out. This entire PHP 8 upgrade has been a really great experience of like connecting to other open source maintainers and helping them out, them helping us out. And it's just amazing to see how the PHP community works together and all the dots tie in together. I'm gonna try to answer our first question because I saw Nuno has a question for us, and his question is, "What's the most annoying breaking change that we had to deal with in PHP 8?" And I think, like, if I remember it correctly, it was like I don't remember the specific details, but there was a change to callables in PHP 8. That led to a lot of broken parts in the framework. So I think it was call user function or something, the function that we used a lot inside the framework. And the behavior was kind of changed depending on when you were using an actual closure or like the array syntax to call classes with their invocable methods. And apparently that was changed a little bit. We had to work around that. It took us a small amount of time to figure out what it exactly was. And we had to write our own sort of polyfill class. I think Graham wrote a lot for that class, and Taylor also wrote a lot of code for that class to make sure that we were kind of using the same behavior from PHP 7.4. So the breaking changes wouldn't be that bad for our users, and they could still use that old syntax if they wanted or needed to. I think that was the most annoying breaking change that I can remember of. But like I said, like overall, this experience went very smooth. Overall, like there wasn't really anything majorly breaking for us. So props to the internals team for that. Have you been noticing any breaking changes on your part, Mohammed?
Oh, not necessarily a breaking change, but I noticed like there is somehow a difference between how like the new features added to PHP 8 that in general they are very interesting to me, but I haven't seen any breaking changes that affected running the code, Vapor or Forge or any of the applications that we maintain at Laravel. So no, I haven't seen any breaking changes that affect them.
Okay, that's really great to hear. I see another question here from Aniket, and he's asking, what made you fork the Faker library, and do you plan to add some exciting new features to it? Well, Aniket, to answer your question, the maintainer of the original Faker library decided that he didn't want to continue maintaining the library. He decided that was sort of like feature complete and didn't really wanted to put in the effort anymore to maintaining it, which is totally understandable. Like people's time, people need to decide for their own, of course, where they put their time in. And maintaining a large library like Faker is, of course, a lot of time consuming. So we're thankful to the maintainer of the original Faker library for maintaining it. What we decided to do was more sort of a community effort. We decided to reach out to quite a few other people who are helping maintain the Faker library in their own spare time. And we set up a new GitHub organization, invited a lot of those people into that GitHub organization, into a Slack channel as well. And we looked at how we could take over the fork of Faker and look into how we could roll out PHP 8 support and set up a really nice base for maintaining the library further in the future. Just to have like a lot of people involved in that there's never like a single person blocking the ongoing support for that library. It's now called Faker PHP/Faker. So if you still have the old Faker library in your composer.json, make sure you update to the latest one to receive the latest features and PHP 8 support. About new features, I can't really tell a lot about that at the moment. I'm not really directly involved a lot with the development of the next Faker version, but I know there's a lot of people currently very actively working on it, and I'm sure that the next Faker library will be as easy to use as the current one is. So stay tuned for more on that. Thanks for your question, Aniket. Okay, I think like I said like most of the things I wanted to say about PHP 8. Like just to wrap things up in general, it's been a very smooth transition. All of the first party libraries, except for Scout, and the framework is of course patched as well. They're all ready for you to use on PHP 8. I just wanted to highlight again the really nice work we did with the others open source maintainers. Really grateful to them for helping us out. I think that's it for me for PHP 8. So I wanted to like check in with you, Mohammed, if you had some interesting things as well to share with the rest of us.
Yeah, I think my job is interesting as well. Like your job is to keep the open source repositories running, and my job is to take care of the many of the production applications that we run in the company. So I think our jobs are equally interesting. However, sometimes I think your job like applying to all the issues and closing issues and people complaining about closing issues. So that's something I don't envy you about. Definitely.
But yeah, definitely. Like you said, we have very interesting jobs, but very different ones. As people might know, like I'm mostly working on the open source libraries at Laravel, and Mohammed is has a lot of focus on to our products like Vapor, but as well as on Spark and Forge and such. But I can imagine, Mohammed, that like doing issues for me is of course like a very routine behavior, but the same goes for answering support requests on those products, of course.
Yeah, so one thing like regarding working on the applications that we maintain at Laravel is that while working on these applications, we find areas that can be enhanced in Laravel itself, or things that can be fixed, things that can become better. And from this, we get the ideas that, or most of the ideas that Taylor adds, or the features that Taylor adds to the framework itself, are based on pain points that he found while working on Forge, Vapor, Envoyer, Spark, and so on. And mentioning this now reminds me of what happened 2 weeks ago that triggered the whole queue system improvements that I've been working on for the past 2 weeks. So 2 weeks ago, our beloved co-worker Nuno, he was working on Vapor, and the part he was working on required that when the server updates, some updates, specific updates that when they happen on the server, we push to pusher, we broadcast to pusher an event, and the user interface at Vapor listens to that event and updates the interface with the status or the latest status, so people or so users can follow what's going on behind the scenes. And the problem was, while Nuno was testing this, he noticed that the interface wasn't updating. So the events were fired, but the interface wasn't updating. And tracking this, he realized that the update or the event was broadcasted from inside a database transaction. And for those of you who haven't dealt with database transactions before, it works that you combine a group of SQL statements together, and you send them to the SQL server, and they will only take effect in MySQL or on SQL in general together. So if anything happened in the middle, so if there are like 3 queries and only 2 of them succeeded, and the last query an exception was thrown or anything, the first 2 queries which were successful will be will not take effect. They will be like rolled back. So that's the idea of the database transaction. And what happened is that the code was running inside a database transaction for several reasons, and the broadcasting event was sent from inside the database transaction. And that event is basically a queue job, and the job was sent to the queue, and the queue started to run the job. And in the constructor of the job, of course, there's an eloquent model, and when that job ran, the eloquent model threw an exception with model not found exception, and that's why the event never made it to pusher, and that's why the user interface didn't reflect the changes. And the problem here is that even though the transaction in general, it succeeded, no exceptions were thrown or anything, and the database was updated, and the model itself was in the database, the job was complaining that the model wasn't found because the job actually ran before the transaction commit. So anything that runs before the transaction commit from outside the transaction, it won't be able to see the changes in the database. The changes in the database will only be reflected after the transaction commence. And because the queue workers run in a separate PHP process, this process is too fast. It picks the job before the transaction commits, and that's why the exception happened. So I started thinking about solutions to this problem, because we did this mistake several times, and sometimes you forget that you are inside the database transaction and you just dispatch a job while you shouldn't. And sometimes the queue job is actually a listener, that it's not very obvious from the code. While you are writing the transaction code, it's not very obvious that there is a queue job that will be sent, like the broadcasting event. It's a queue job, but it's not something that you explicitly dispatch from inside the transaction. But actually, both problems happen, like explicitly dispatching from inside the transaction and having a job that gets dispatched while you are not aware. Yeah. So we have done this mistake several times, and I was thinking about ways to prevent us and prevent everyone from doing this same mistake over and over. And debugging this kind of things is really hard. It's really hard. Like, you see model not found exception, but the model is there. You can see it in the database, and it drives me crazy when this happens.
I can imagine that those are like one of the most difficult things to start debugging. Everything related around queues and like those sort of things are always a trigger for me to start losing my mind.
Yeah. So what I did actually is that I was thinking about how we can enclose some code and store it in a local cache, not execute it right away, and only execute it after a transaction commit. So you say, for example, let's give an example for when you're signing up a new user, and after the user sign up, you send a welcome email, and you don't want to send this email if the user doesn't exist. And if the user existed, but you're sending the email from within a transaction, by the time the job runs, the transaction won't be commented and the email won't be sent, even though the user was created. So taking this transaction, I want to enclose this sending email logic and store it in a local cache, detect that there is a transaction open, and store it in a local cache. Don't execute this code until this open transaction commits. And that's when we finally dispatch the job all the way around the code. And I started with a pull request last week. It was like a rough estimate or like a rough idea of what I wanted to do, and we discussed it with several people on GitHub, and I discussed it with Taylor. And then I came up with another pull request, a better one that actually does that, and we tested it, and it was actually merged in the framework, where you enclose some code, and this code will only be commit or will only run after a database transaction commits. And if the database transaction was rolled back, this code will be discarded. So if the user creation failed, the welcome email will not be sent. And if the user creation succeeded and the transaction succeeded as well, the welcome email will be sent. And that's basically what I've been trying to work on for the past week. And yeah, if you have something to say, like, I'm happy to.
No, it's very interesting to hear what you've been working on, like, because I see progress reports coming by, but it's always like a small summary, but you kind of tend to forget like how much work really and how much research really goes into these kind of things. And I guess like also like a system like Vapor and even Forge like really allows you to go very deep into these kind of problems. Must be super interesting for you to like unravel all of these issues.
Yeah, actually, most of the time, it's not like when you say it's interesting and do a lot of work. Like, actually, most of the time when you're working on something like this, you spend most of the time like just staring out of the window and thinking about your life choices. But basically, like, it's at the end when you find the solution, you feel like some satisfaction, and that's what drives you to tackle these complicated problems in the first place. Because when you find a solution, you feel really good about yourself.
Yeah, and like it's like you said, like what I find most interesting about all of this is because like as people know, we don't only have the open source repositories, we have Vapor, we have Forge, we have our paid products, and what's nice that we kind of like build all of our paid products on top of Laravel is that we can really react quickly to these kind of problems. For example, you had a specific problem with queuing and transactions now. You send in pull requests to the framework to immediately resolve those. We can immediately merge and release and tag those. So everyone in the community can benefit from those solutions. And that's a really powerful thing to have, like to really own the stack which you've built your paid products on top of. So that's really nice to see this kind of particular example and really the benefits you get out of those immediately.
Yeah, like when you're like following people on the forums and checking GitHub issues, you find some problems that people report about things that can be enhanced with Laravel. But when you're working on an actual application and you hit these problems yourself, that's actually a shortcut to enhancing the framework, because you have the problem, you can replicate it, and you can fix it. So that's really a good thing about owning the stack. That you find the problems while using your framework, and you fix the framework or you enhance it to solve those problems. So yeah, that's basically how the whole database transaction improvement ideas came to me. And aside from the database transaction thing, we also wanted to include built-in support for when you say, for example, this job, when dispatched, if it's inside a database transaction, don't dispatch it right away, wait for it until it commits. So we tried to find ways that you can say, in general, any job or these specific jobs, when dispatched, don't dispatch them right away, wait until the transaction commits. So we are trying to find like deep integrations so people won't have to enclose their code inside a closure or something. So we came up with the general solution, which is enclosing the code inside a closure, and you say that this closure shouldn't be invoked until the transaction commits. But we also want people to be able to easily say any job that's dispatched inside transactions, even without me using this closure thing. Just don't push it and wait until the transaction commits. Same thing for mail and notification and event listeners and broadcast events and so on. So it's just one simple configuration that you use, and it will reflect on everything. So you won't have to change anything inside your code. You'll just make some changes to your configuration files, and Laravel will take care of that for you. No queue job, not an event listener will be dispatched until transactions commit. So that's why, again, you won't have to change anything about your application, just a one-liner.
That's really nice, like just to have that out of the box ready to go for you. Actually, your entire conversation about transactions reminds me about a different problem I had earlier this week, or I think it was last week. And it also ties a little bit in with PHP 8. So the problem I had was like someone reported an issue where they tried database transactions in their test suite, I think it was, and on PHP 8. And suddenly they were getting an exception thrown for their MySQL or Maria database. And it was kind of like not obvious why this was happening on PHP 8 and not on the previous PHP versions. So what it turns out, the problem was that when you're running database transactions, there are some particular situations where in MySQL and Maria DB can trigger the changes that were made within the transactions to be committed immediately. So like, for example, a specific example would be like creating a database table. That's a change in the database engine that immediately triggers the transaction to be committed. And what previous PHP versions did, they were not throwing that change explicitly to the end user. So it was kind of like a silent behavior behind the scenes that would always allow trigger your transaction to be ended. But in PHP 8, you now get an exception for it explicitly. And so we were kind of like looking at why is this happening? And it's just like that PHP 8 is now very explicit about these implicit commits that are happening behind the scenes. So that's actually a very good thing to happen. So we verified that behavior, verified that it was the actually correct behavior. Yeah, go ahead.
That reminds me of something like to say that even if you have 100% test coverage, some problems are not detectable until people actually run the code. And that's why it's important when we make releases that people start pulling those releases and updating their applications and test it in a staging environment and report back these issues, because sometimes it's impossible to detect these kind of issues even with hundreds of or thousands of tests written in the framework. It's completely impossible. So it's important to run actual applications.
Yeah, and even like with this kind of particular test, like you can like actually use a MySQL database in testing and try to run and mimic these issues. You probably can go very far in recreating the same behavior that you get on a production or staging environment. But in the end, like 100% test coverage of every single edge case, I don't think that really can exist. Like some bugs are only going to happen in production when you actually encounter them. But if you can reverse engineer those into tests or into regression tests rather, that's always better, of course. But for some things, it's just not possible. Luckily for this, we kind of managed to write a test. So we now have a new test in the framework that actually verifies that the exception is thrown for PHP 8. Or I might still have to send that one in. I think I still have like a branch ready to go for that. I need to check in on that. But that one was definitely reproducible. So that's nice. Okay, so I have one small thing in between. I saw a really funny question popping up in the stream earlier. So Gabriel here is asking if our chairs are identical. And they are. So we have the same chair, which is fun. But I think you recently moved, Mohammed, and your old chair is still at your old place. And you wanted to get the new chair, if I'm correct, but they weren't available anymore.
Yes, because like I had the IKEA markers in the other apartment, and when we moved, I couldn't bring that chair with me, so it stayed there because we will go there some days and I'll have to work on the other desk. So I brought a brand new desk, and I didn't find the IKEA markers in IKEA while I was searching. So I thought, what's the next best thing, or what's the thing that was recommended? And I heard you and James have this chair. So I got it. So now the three of us have the same chair.
For those who are wondering, it's not company policy to have this chair. I'm sure Nunu is enjoying his own chair very much. This also isn't IKEA sponsored stream for clarity. Just a really funny thing to remark. Thanks, Gabriel, for that. Okay, so let's continue. I think we have like a couple of minutes left to talk about a few more things. I know, what are the rest of the things you still had on your list you wanted to go over?
Well, for the past couple of days, and I opened the pull request this morning, I've been working on increasing the reliability of the queue system in terms of pushing. You know that when a job fails while running, it will be stored in a database table that you can retry the job later. So that adds to the reliability of the framework. So even if things went wrong, you can still retry and you will not lose the jobs. But one problem we have now in the framework is that if, for example, you're using the SQS queue driver or Redis, and something happened and it's working issue or something while you are pushing a job, this job will get lost because it won't be stored in the queue storage, and an exception will be thrown to the user and the job will be just closed. And to fix this, I worked on two features. One feature is to retry pushing. So if it fails, you can configure it to keep retrying for like 2 or 3 times with a sleep of 5 seconds in between. So you retry pushing the job for 15 seconds. So if SQS went down for 5 seconds, you won't lose the jobs for these 5 seconds. You will just keep retrying to push until the service comes back online. And things went really bad and they didn't come back online for all your retries, you can configure the framework to store the jobs in a secondary queue. It's a database or DynamoDB or Redis or whatever. And this secondary queue will store all the jobs that are not actually pushed to the queue. And later on, you can run a cron job to check for the secondary queue and find any jobs that were failed to push and try to push them again. So that way you will not lose jobs while being pushed to the queue and something like SQS went down. And that's something I've seen it reported by Jack Ellis from Fathom Analytics. He reported that this issue happened with him when his SQS was down for like temporarily, and he lost some jobs, and he had to retry pushing to update his code to retry pushing. So now, starting when this pull request gets merged, you can configure Laravel to automatically retry pushing if pushing fails. And also, if pushing completely fails, you can store these jobs in a secondary queue to be retried later, so you will not completely lose them.
Okay, that's really nice. I saw the pull request coming in for that one. That looked very promising. For those who are wondering about it, I think if you go to the framework repository right now, the pull request will be open for you to view, so you can follow along a little bit with that. But that definitely was a very interesting concept and solution to that particular problem. Thanks for that, Mohammed. Okay, I think like this is a good place to wrap up things a little bit. We talked a little bit about
one quick update is that people who are using Laravel Vapor, they noticed that a couple of days ago in AWS reInvent, they announced the support of containers when it comes to running Lambda applications or running Lambda functions. You can now provide a container image, and this container image can be up to 10 gigabytes. So people using Vapor now have to comply to limits to the application size and the vendor directory size, and also the runtime size. So they cannot, or we at Vapor, we cannot include all the PHP extensions that people ask for, because that will increase the size of the runtime and we will hit Lambda limits. But now with the announcement of support to containers up to 10 gigabytes, we can now allow people to deploy very large applications that have required packages that are large in size, so you won't have to worry about the size of the vendor directory or the size of your application. And you can also customize your Docker image and install any PHP extension that your application needs. And that I think this will allow more people to use to move to serverless. But now that it has like more relaxed limits when it comes to the runtime side and the application side. So I started to play with it yesterday a little bit, not a little bit for the entire day. And yeah, like have you seen or have you tried looking into the AWS documentation before? Did you try?
No, not yet. I have to admit that like I haven't been able to play a lot with the AWS on that part yet. Yeah, I'm too busy with other things, I'm afraid. But it does it seems very interesting. Like you said, like the larger container size opens up a lot of more possibilities. A lot of more apps can now migrate to AWS Lambda to serverless, like you said. It also opens up the possibilities for like processing larger files, large reports. I think, like you mentioned, Jack from Fathom Analytics mentioned that it was going to be very beneficial to them. So yeah, that's really nice to see like AWS improving there again, like to just like keep coming with those new features, those new services like crazy. It's really impressive. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm hoping like in the next couple of weeks we'll add support to Lambda container images to Laravel Vapor for people to try out. And I think it is going to be optional. You can keep running the old runtime, or you can use the Lambda containers. That way people can choose whatever fits their projects and whatever fits their budget. So that's it for me. That's all the updates I have.
Okay, thanks for that, Mohammed. Really insightful. Thanks. Okay. This is it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed. We talked a little bit about PHP 8, a little bit about Vapor, a little about queuing, a little about everything, really. If you have further questions, feel free to shoot us a mention on Twitter. And like I said, we don't have a fixed schedule for these kind of streams. Just follow us on Twitter to see when the next episode will be and with who of us four will be on the podcast. Thanks everyone for joining.
Hopefully Taylor will come on board one day, and
hopefully. Definitely. Definitely you're gonna have him on this podcast as well. Okay, see you later, Mohammed. Enjoy the rest of your day.